Where does every NFL head coach rank halfway through the 2023 NFL season? What's up, BLV? It's Mitch here with my mid-season NFL tier rankings. This time for the head coaches across the league. Ranking them from the worst. You need to get fired. To you, sir, are exceptional. Gronk, spike that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments section below where you would rank your favorite team's head coach. Does he need to be fired? Leave now, please. Or should he retain his job? Let me know in the comment section below and let's rank every head coach. Let's go. Here we go. Head coach tiers. The categories. The elite coach, the game-changing coach, the coach that can elevate the entire franchise. Franchise coach is one that is going to be there long-term, is a very good coach, and usually gives the team an edge. The good coach is a serviceable, smart coach. He knows what he's doing. He's probably experienced. He's probably been pretty good and successful throughout his career. The mid coach, rather, has not proven enough to be a great coach, but he's shown flashes of greatness, but other times he hasn't exactly been great. Could be better is the coach that you probably want to fire him and move on, but you don't necessarily know that you have better out there. And then fire him is self-explanatory. Get this man as far away from my football team as humanly possible. And remember, guys, these are all based on strictly this year. So nothing to do with their resume, their Hall of Fame career, or anything like that. It's based on this season. So let me know in the comments where you agree and you disagree. Let's begin with Jonathan Gannon, who quite honestly has shocked me with his success this year. And not by wins and losses, but just by making a Cardinals roster that quite honestly was one of the worst on paper I've ever seen entering NFL season, actually competitive, offensively, defensively. He has no names on his defense. He's known as a defensive coach, and pretty much he's competed. Are they one of the better defenses in football? Absolutely not. But they have competed. They beat the Cowboys. They shocked the world. And they have competed in games. They were up huge against the Giants. They have not been as great as of late. And overall, while I have not been paying super close attention to Jonathan Gannon in press conferences or anything like that, in order to get effort at the level the Cardinals are getting, you have to have belief in the system, the structure, the coach, the culture. So overall, I think Jonathan Gannon, you could call him a mid-coach right now. I think, we still have an incomplete sort of grading, but I feel like we kind of get the idea that he's going to be at least okay as a head coach. Arthur Smith of the Atlanta Falcons, as frustrating as he is to listen to in press conferences, talking about nonsense about Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts over the years, Drake London, Desmond Ridder, the man has some of the worst press conferences that make no sense. And he is a very frustrating coach because it feels like he is a smart guy. He's good with offensive football, especially run game. But it feels like he also misses half the equation when it comes to utilizing his best players in the best spots to succeed, which is definitely a negative for me. Overall, his team has been successful. He's doing it without a very good quarterback, and he's winning as projected. So I would call Arthur Smith a good coach. He's certainly flawed, but overall, he's doing well. And pretty much every season, he's rather exceeded expectations or met expectations. John Harbaugh. Overall, when you look at his offseason, his decision to move on from Greg Roman, I think that was a wise one. It should have taken place a little bit sooner, in my opinion, but it was wise. I would also say that Harbaugh is always very good at getting his teams prepared for games early in the season. And Harbaugh is just a proven Super Bowl champion level head coach. I would call him definitely a franchise coach, and as of this year, he's been pretty darn solid. Nothing spectacular, but really, really good. And the overall team has only lost 2 games where they were heavily injured. He navigated that, and they've succeeded. Next, we've got Zach Taylor, who honestly I like as a head coach, and I think he's had a pretty good career considering where he started and where people thought he would go. And honestly, there were times where people thought Zach Taylor was the worst coach in the league, and I was certainly in that camp. I would also say that Zach Taylor has proven over the last couple of years he's a player's coach. Players respect him on the Bengals, and he is very good at shifting towards what the team needs. And oftentimes, this coaching staff as a whole has done a good job at evolving throughout a season. That being said, so far this year, they have underwhelmed. He has not been able to navigate his quarterback's situation with the injury. The defense hasn't been as great. The offensive line hasn't been as good as projected. The run game hasn't been very good. T. Higgins has been underwhelming. Overall, the team has not performed. So I would say that Zach Taylor this year could be better. I'm not going to say he's been completely terrible. I would not fire him, but he could be better right now. So that's where I'd put him. Sean McDermott. McDermott, it's tough to kind of manage him because he's a defensive-minded coach that also happens to have an elite quarterback. So how much do you give him credit for the team's success? I feel like right now, more than ever before, McDermott is being carried by Josh Allen. And I've kind of felt that way a little bit over the past couple of years, but I think especially now, the defense with the injuries popping up, McDermott hasn't really done much so far to be able to minimize the impact of those injuries. I feel like every week his defense doesn't come with a super elaborate or creative game plan, and he's now the defensive play caller, so you definitely have to take that into perspective. And then also, the offense, I feel like, is a little underwhelming from a schematic standpoint. I think this team relies a little bit too much on their talent, and especially their quarterback. So I would say while they have a pretty good record, I'd say he could be better for sure. He's not completely awful, but you are considering, is he on the hot seat? If he doesn't exceed to the level of winning a playoff game and 2 playoff games, even with the injuries the Bills have had, you might want to look to move on because you have Josh Allen in his prime. You need to maximize that, and the Bills really haven't so far. Next, you have Frank Reich. Honestly, I think you place him in the fire him category. I've always been a Frank Reich fan, but as of right now, this is the worst team easily in the NFL. I think that many people would place the Panthers number 32 in their power rankings. And before the season, if you would have asked, how do the Panthers do with Bryce Young, you'd probably say, they're competitive, they're not very good, but they win probably like 5 games. Right now, it looks like this team could barely win 1 game. So I put that blame on the coach and the coaching staff. Also, the offense has not been very good. And he's an offensive guy, former quarterback. I have to put him in the fire him category. The Panthers could easily move on right away next year with a new head coach, and I wouldn't be shocked. Next, we've got Matt Eberflus. Eberflus is a tricky one because I actually think that a lot of people put pressure and blame on Matt Eberflus for Justin Fields' problems. And I don't think that's really accurate, and I don't think that's a good assessment. I would also say that he hasn't been great on the defensive side of the ball for his career as a head coach. And so far, not this year, although they have improved with time. And I feel like the last 3 weeks, the Bears defense has improved. I would also say that they have a couple of wins that maybe you wouldn't have expected. So I'm going to put Eberflus, given the expectations, in the could be better category maybe. But I also feel like he should be fired. So it's kind of like, where do I put him? So overall, I feel like he should be gone. So you know what? I'm going to put him in fire him because I do think they need a new coach. I don't think he's anything special. I certainly think that you could get better out there. So I think he's rather in could be better or in fire him. I personally think it's fire him, even though he doesn't have a quarterback. Kevin Stefanski. Stefanski's tricky as well because it's another offensive guy where the defense carries him. And he's not responsible for the defense. It's Jim Schwartz. That being said, if he had any say in bringing in Jim Schwartz, you have to give him respect for that. I'd also say that he's done a decent job on offense, considering Nick Chubb, his best offensive player, and Deshaun Watson, his quarterback, are rather injured or just flat stink at the game of football. And he was forced to take on Deshaun Watson. This was not his decision. So for me, I would say Stefanski's been good this year. I think it's been one of his better years so far. I'd put him in the good category. Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy got definitely lambasted by Kyle Shanahan on Sunday Night Football for everyone to see. And that kind of, I think, ruined his reputation this year as a coach. I feel like overall he's an average coach. So I'd probably put him in the mid category. I think so far the Cowboys have been about what expected, especially when you consider that Trayvon Diggs got hurt, who's one of their better defensive players. Their defense is what I expected, elite. Their offense is good, which is what I expected. Although I feel like as an offensive coach, it could be better offensively, and it's not. And I think that falls on McCarthy. So there's good, there's bad. I think overall, meeting expectations are the Cowboys. I put McCarthy where he belongs, in the mid. Next, Sean Payton. I'm not going to fire Sean Payton. And the reason I'm not going to fire Sean Payton is because he did not make this mess. He did not ask for Russell Wilson. He was brought in to potentially save Russell Wilson. This is a team that is in a little bit of a rebuild. I would say that it could be better for Sean Payton. His team has not played well. His defense has been historically bad. I would say that on his side of the ball, offense, it's been better than last year. He has improved the offense. He has improved Russell Wilson. Those are positives, which keep him out of the fire him category. But the culture is iffy. The way that he talks about his team, his quarterback, his players is a little iffy. Certainly has rubbed people the wrong way. So I would put him in the could be better. Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell this year. I think you have to say that Dan Campbell has elevated his ability to coach. I feel like he hasn't made as many glaring game management decisions. Maybe he hasn't really been put in those spots yet. I also feel like the expectation for Detroit was to win the NFC North, to elevate, to get better. They recently got destroyed by Baltimore. Maybe that's a little bit on him for not having his team prepared after, Detroit was on such a hot streak. But I feel like he's a franchise coach right now. He's coaching at a franchise level. Some of that is Ben Johnson and the coaches around him. But I think overall what he's done with the culture and the stability of Detroit, just understanding that we know what we're getting from the Lions as a good football team each and every week, is something we couldn't always say about the Lions. So I've got to put him in the franchise category. Matt LaFleur this year, I think has been kind of bleh. Like I feel like he's kind of been le bleh this year, so I'd put him in could be better. I think he's a good coach overall. But I don't necessarily look at his game plans offensively and scream and say, wow, this is revolutionary. You're doing so much to help your young quarterback. Definitely don't see that. The run game that has been his go-to and his forte has not been great this year. The offensive line has been solid, but not as good. And it feels like he's not getting the most out of his weaponry, like Christian Watson. Defensively, still has struggled to figure out an identity on that side of the ball. Feels like the team has been a little bit inconsistent, and they lack a true consistency week to week that we understand what we're going to get. Maybe it's a lack of talent. I don't necessarily think that, so I'm going to say it could be better. Doug Peterson, I think, has overall been good this year. I think there's been moments where they've underwhelmed as a team, but I think mostly the Jags are on the right path, and I feel like he is a upper echelon, top 10 play caller in the sport right now. He is a gambler, gutsy type of guy with a really good attitude, and I think he's a really good leader of men. So I really like Doug Peterson. He has a nice blend of leadership qualities and strategic qualities that I think mesh together to be a very good coach. I don't think this has been his best effort this year or anything like that, but I think he's been pretty good. Next, Andy Reid. I don't think Andy Reid has been the greatest he's ever been. This is one of the greatest coaches of all time. But I think overall, he's been pretty darn good. I would maybe say that Andy Reid not winning that first game without Kelsey and Chris Jones, there was an opportunity there to win that game. But otherwise, they've been pretty good. The offense has struggled in part. Some games it hasn't been the best. The Jets game, the Broncos game. His play calling at times has been a little sketchy in short yardage and red zone. So Andy Reid, is this a perfect coaching performance? Not necessarily. I feel like he is still arguably the best coach in the league, though. So this is a tricky one. I think overall he's an elite coach. But this year, has he been an elite coach? I guess that's a bit questionable. How much of it is Mahomes? I think Spagnuolo's defense has done a lot for them this year. They haven't really played anyone this year since the first couple of weeks. So it's tough. It's really tough. I think he's done a good job with some of the new weapons, like Rashee Rice, getting them up to speed. It's Andy Reid. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'll put him in the elite category. I don't know if he's been, unbelievable, but he's been good, and they've performed to expectation. Brandon Staley, he deserves a category of his own, but this is certainly fire him. He should have been fired after the playoff game last year. The guy is an absolute idiot. He is the worst coach in the NFL. His defensive schemes, week after week, make no sense. People try to defend this guy. He never double teams the number one receiver. His defense stinks. It's the highest paid defense in the NFL. He's a terrible fourth down decision maker. He does go for it a lot. Congratulations. But he usually makes the wrong decision of when to go for it. He just is bad. And I don't think his players believe in him at all. Sean McVay. I would say overall Sean McVay has been franchise level this year. I was critical of Sean McCabo last year, as I felt like he took the foot off the gas and got a little bit too fat and happy after the Super Bowl win. But I think he's elevated his game, and he's definitely taken it up a notch. I wouldn't say he's been elite, because I think the team has still slipped up in some moments, and I don't think they've really competed as well as people think against the elite teams. Had a really good half against the Niners, but they didn't show up in the second half. They had a terrible second half against the Steelers. They got kind of manhandled against Philadelphia, in my opinion. They did win some games, shockingly, like Seattle was maybe his best game, and that was the first game of the year. We'll see how he does against Dallas here this week, but I feel like overall Sean McVay has been very good with his offense, very good with his young roster, putting those players in a position to succeed, and obviously the guy has built a very strong and stable culture. So Sean McVay is a franchise coach. Josh McDaniels. I have to say fire him. As much as I like Josh McDaniels, I feel like his offense isn't really bringing anything of note to the table. He's an offensive guy. He's always been known as one of the better offensive play callers through his tenure in New England. And I feel like there was a time he was an elite play caller, an offensive mind. But we have not seen that very often with the Raiders. And I also feel like there's an inconsistency with the belief of his players. There's a lot of stories that leak out of there in terms of Devontae Adams, Chandler Jones, Josh Jacobs, different players' unhappiness. It's pretty consistent. The fan base is pretty frustrated with some of his decisions. And I feel like overall as a game manager, he has failed. I think that's a huge reason he is not better thought of with the fan base, because I feel like he could have won a few more games in the last couple of years if he would have just managed the game a bit better. So overall, I think McDaniels, I wouldn't say necessarily you have to fire him right this second. It's not a Brandon Staley situation, but he's a guy that if this thing doesn't look good at the end of the year, he's got to go. Next, Mike McDaniel, I would say he's been elite. There's no debate. He has put together the best offense in the NFL this year, and much of it is carried by the scheme. Obviously, he has great players at wide receiver. The O-line at a certain point was pretty good. The running backs fast. The quarterback, Tua, has been playing very well. But I feel like Mike McDaniel, he has a different type of personality. I think that showcases a flamboyance and confidence within his team and a little bit of a swagger that I like. That being said, I think some people would argue franchise because in the big games, McDaniel has not been his best. Against the Eagles, against the Bills, Miami has not played to that level. Maybe that's just Miami. I don't know. But I still have to give him a ton of credit. He's an offensive guy. The way it's designed in Miami, he builds the offense. He is the play caller. He has the best offense in the league with a non-elite quarterback. So you have to give him a ton of credit. Bill Belichick. At one point, a week or two ago, I would have told you, fire his ass. I think overall, he's not one of the worst coaches in the league. I think at times this year, we have been blaming the GM, Bill Belichick, for the head coach's faults this season. And I think that's very true. But this is a separate category. This is just the coach. I think that performance against Buffalo did so much for him. He turned it around. And it's not just about the schematics, playing new players, putting players in a position to succeed for the first time in a while, but it's the energy the team played with, which says there's still belief in the building in Bill Belichick. That says a lot. So overall, I'd say Belichick, you could be better. We know you could be better. So do it. Next, we've got Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen is tricky. I don't necessarily feel like he's been bad. I don't necessarily feel like he's been good. I don't necessarily feel like he's underwhelmed. I don't think he's surprised. I think his defense is good. He's a defensive coach. I feel like the culture, overall maybe he gets fired just because they haven't had a lot of winning going on. But honestly, I kind of feel like Dennis Allen has been okay this year. Like, you think about what he's supposed to bring, a tough football team that has a good defense. I think overall that's what he's brought. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Saints fans, let me know. But I think he's kind of been mid this year. Brian Daboll, I'd also say he's been mid, especially for his standards. I think the beginning of the year was a disaster. They played teams that were much more talented. But since then, and since Daniel Jones has gotten hurt, this team has turned it around and had exceptional performances. So I think Brian Daboll is keeping the belief in the building, and he's improving his team, which is what great coaches do. Robert Saleh. I'd honestly say Robert Saleh is not my favorite coach in the league. I don't like him very much. He's had a good year. A good year. I think that his defense has been the reason they've won some games that they probably shouldn't have. I think that his management of Zach Wilson, whether he deserves that or not, has been good. And the ability to just stabilize the team post Aaron Rodgers is impressive. So I got to put him in the good category. Nick Sirianni, I'd say he's been franchise level. Not super impressive from a schematic perspective, as the Eagles really haven't been for the last couple of years. I think they're missing maybe a little bit of flavor that they had with the new Colts head coach, Steichen. But I feel like his bravado, his energy has kept the Eagles on their game, has kept the Eagles winning games, and he has a good idea. He's a really good manager of the game. He really understands what his team's strengths are and how to win games. That's what I really like about him. Mike Tomlin, I think you have to say he's been elite. For no other reason than the Steelers don't make any sense. They should not be winning games, and he's winning games. So that's all I can really say. Could you argue he's been franchised because he still has Matt Canada on his staff? I guess that's fair, and the offense has been a disaster. But I think overall, his defense, which he's a defensive coach, is winning him games, putting him in positions to win. And they're winning games unexpectedly. He's upsetting teams. Pete Carroll, I think, has been good. Nothing special. I think pretty much Pete Carroll throughout his career has been to this level. Good, if not better. Brings a lot of energy. Very good culture coach. And I think it's pretty much been to expectations this year. Beating who he should beat. That's what he's doing. Todd Bowles. I actually think Todd Bowles has been better than last year. His defense has been pretty good. He is a defensive play caller and coach. His offense is still struggling, which is ultimately what might get him fired at the end of the day, because he's not an offensive coach, which is what might get him fired. He doesn't have Tom Brady. He had to shift towards Baker Mayfield. I think overall Todd Bowles has been mid. Next, Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel is a great coach. I think he's one of the best coaches in the NFL. That being said, is this his strongest year? I would probably say no. The team offensively is still struggling to block people and make plays. Defense is pretty solid. Nothing special. This is not a very talented team, period. I would say Vrabel, for his standards, could be better, but I'd probably place him in the mid category. Ron Rivera, I think, is the definition of could be better. And the reason I say that is they've won some games, maybe more than expected so far this year. They competed well with the Eagles, things like that. But at the same time, his defense, his baby, is not playing that well. He's not very good in pass defense, and the offense can't block a soul. Some of that has to fall on Ron Rivera, so I say could be better. Kyle Shanahan, he's absolutely an elite coach, and I think he's had a pretty elite season, just with Brock Purdy coming back from an injury, having to manage that, having to manage the expectations of being a Super Bowl team. Now, they've dropped 2 games in a row, but I don't necessarily feel like Shanahan was at fault for either game. You could maybe argue the Browns game, but I feel like more of that had to do with the Purdy situation. They missed a field goal, first of all. He put them in a position to win. And the Vikings game, if you want to blame anyone on that coaching staff, I'd say that would be Steve Wilkes. But the turnovers were also a big factor, as well as Brock Purdy getting a concussion. So some kind of unluckiness for Shanahan. But I think when you watch his team play, there's his ingredients and fingerprints all over it. Absolutely elite. Next, DeMeco Ryans. I'd say DeMeco Ryans has been franchise level. Now, that might be a shocker, but for the Texans to be playing as well as they are, despite whoever they're playing, he has elevated the defense. He has made them better against the run. They've been better against the pass than projected. Their offense has been superb, and I think he made the right hires around him as well, especially on offense with the play caller. So I give him a lot of credit for that. He is a very good coach so far in the NFL. Shane Steichen, I actually think has been borderline very good. I'd put him in the good category. I think there's things with game management he's got to fix. I think he needs to understand how to pace a game and how to... I think last week that definitely hurt him, and I think he lost the game for them last week. But overall, his offense has been really impressive no matter who's been at quarterback. Even last week with Minshew against the Browns was a shocker, and that is his side of the ball. I think he also brings pretty good energy, and he's a younger voice. I like it. Kevin O'Connell, I think he's been mid. I think the Vikings have been pretty much what they've expected. I thought he was brilliant, elite versus the Niners. He had one of the best coaching performances all season, but I feel like overall he's been fairly mid. His offense is good, but I don't think they have a ton of talent. It's kind of tough to figure out. You could argue maybe he's been good. I mean, that's debatable. But that's kind of how I see it. Those are my coaching tiers. Got 4 elite coaches this year. We've got 5 franchise coaches this year, or very good coaches this year. We have 6 good coaches this year, 7 mid coaches this year, back down to 6 could be betters, and just 4 fired. Those are my coaching tiers, my quarterback tiers. I already did. Make sure to check that out. It's Mitch. Let me know where you agree or disagree. Peace.